Now is the time we bring you the virtual stage of our Achieving Optimal Health Conference at Georgetown University. To experience this talk with all the videos, slides, and graphics, go to bbrconsulting.us and click on Conference. One more time, visit bbrconsulting.us. Thanks for staying curious and for living your best life with us.
The way we take care of ourselves is ever evolving. And what we know for sure is that our mind and spirit are linked to our physical body, and that our wellness seems to extend into our communities and the planet we all share. It is very, very clear that wellness is interconnected. We love spending time with you to explore and practice the breakthroughs, the insights, and the passions of incredible people helping us all see the world in a whole new light. This is Health Gig.
Dr. Wren McCallister is a double board certified fellowship trained orthopedic surgeon specializing in care of the hand and upper extremities. He is also committed to foundational health. And in today's podcast, we'll hear about the fundamentals Dr. McCallister believes are essential to good health. So welcome to Health Gig, Dr. McCallister, but you said we could call you Wren, so that's what we're going to do because we like your name.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
We're so happy to have you, and we've been researching about you and your life and all of the things, but we want to know, just for our listeners, if you could just tell us a little bit about your family and then how you got started on your journey of being the hand surgeon and then the transformation you've made in your life.
I have a wife and 3 kids right now. So they're 14, 17, and 20. So we're kind of moving into a different phase, which is terrific. I met my wife actually as an undergraduate. We were doing research together, and I went to medical school in, I guess, 96, and she entered in 2000. So she went through medical school as well. When she graduated, our son needed a little bit of extra work early on. And so she ended up and was going to be an anesthesia doctor and ended up staying home. And so she's been home with our kids. She's a health coach now. As I went through sort of, you go through life, you get busy, kid stuff, time for yourself, all the usual stuff, and reached a point probably about 3 or 4 years ago where we got home from a vacation, stepped on the scale and was kind of like, crap, what happened? How did I end up, weighing 215? And
I just want to say something really quickly. Sorry. That's amazing that your wife did that.
Yeah.
She must be really an incredible person.
Or she is.
Because she made it through med school and then she knew that your son needed to have her full time.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Wow.
We went through, it's like, well, we probably need 2 nannies, because you need to go or you need to live in. And we made the decision we wanted to raise our own kids. And we weren't sure early on kind of, everything was going on. And turns out he's fine now, but it was just early.
Right.
There were just a lot of things that was uncertain and stuff that I guess they call like sensory processing disorder. I remember at first went through this testing and the autism stuff and things like that. It wasn't that, but it was this thing called sensory processing disorder. It was the closest like label they could get, for lack of a better word. And I remember asking them and said, hey, what happens to these kids when they get older? And they're like, we don't know. Like, what do you mean? We don't know. And I'm like, well, maybe these are kids that were just a little bit different when they were younger and then they grew up fine. And they're like, I don't know, I guess. And so early on, it was difficult. Like I remember one time we were at a park and he was at the top of a hill and he just identified this girl and took sprinting off after her. And he's probably like 4 or 5. And I could see what was happening. And I was just running as fast as I could. And I caught him just before he was about to just basically, like a linebacker, take her out. And so she spun around and she spun a little bit. And her mom looked at He just kind of like walked away embarrassed. And it was a difficulty initiating social interaction. And another time we were at a bookstore, Barnes & Noble. They don't exist anymore. And he's at the little train setup they have up there. And this kid walks up and he was the only one playing with it. And the kid's on the other side. And he looks at the kid and he kind of looks down. He picks up the train and throws it across the table. Hits him right between the eyes. And I used to pitch in college. And so the first thing I thought was like, sweet, I got a pitcher. This is awesome. Sweet. The second thing I thought, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I'm so embarrassed. I just like froze. And I was like, I'm sorry.
Right.
Now, it was just a challenge. So a lot of work and effort. So she stayed home to help with that, which is terrific. And as he grew up, he just sort of grew out of that stuff, which is fascinating. Now he's a terrific kid, athlete in college and stuff. And so really proud of how he's grown up. But that really changed kind of the course of things. And then so back for my wife, yeah, it did. It made a fundamental shift. And at times, she felt like she gave up a lot. But So as she circled back to it, she still enjoys helping people. And so she'd always been interested in health and wellness and for her own self. And we've been on sort of she kind of had this parallel path in the sense of our realization of a lot of what medicine does is kind of backwards. It's upside down, it's turned around. And so that's why she became a health coach. She thought about going back into medicine. And I said, look, it's kind of work, residencies work. And if you don't really love it, and what's your outcome? What are you going to get to at the end of the day? And so that's where she became a health coach, and her company, Embrace Wellness, she works at perimenopausal women, postmenopausal women, really helping them in these fundamental issues. And so I call foundational health. She kind of hates the term, but that's fine. But it's the same fundamental principles. So as I get off the scale a few years ago, it's like, okay, I got to fix something. And we initially did one of these commercial programs. I did everything they said. I lost 30 pounds. And that was great. Life was sweet. And then it all came back and more. And it's like, okay, well, something's not quite right here. And so as COVID hits and my son was working out and he got to know a professional punter, and the NFL gets everything right so that you couldn't get any exercise equipment, and they get all these hammer weights and things like that. So he goes down for his training camp and says, Jack, do you want to use my weights? And we're like, yeah, dude, take them. So he gets the weights. And so I started lifting with him, eventually got a rack, set everything up in my garage. So finally was like, okay, I've got the time to do this, and just kind of made the decision, okay, I'm going to start lifting. And then it's like, okay, well, you keep putting things off. Now it's time to make a change, right? So that's where I started talking to my wife, and she's always on me to, eat this and eat that. And I was one of those people that could eat anything I wanted through my 20s, wouldn't gain a lick of weight, but those habits that you develop catch up with you, right? And so it all kind of caught up. So talking with her and working through made these changes, and we're able to reverse metabolic syndrome and all these things, which is terrific. But when I look back on it, I realized it was really very simple. It was foundational principles. There's no fancy gimmick. There's no, superfood. There's no Instagram program or anything like that. It's basically paying attention to how did I sleep? How did I think? What did I eat? How did I move? And the habits built around those. And it's really behaviors. And so as I made those changes, patients started commenting, hey, geez, I haven't seen you in 5 years. You look younger than I do. What's going on? And things like that. So, and I started reflecting, you get a little further along, and I realized, I sort of felt incomplete in helping people in the sense that I fixed their hand problem, but they go away, and then either the same person or a very similar type person comes back. And I started realizing they all have the same sort of profile in terms of, body habitus, health problems, concerns. And it's almost like the same person showing up in front of you and the same 4 or 5 problems. And 90% of this is lifestyle related. And so then we started looking into this and realized that, geez, most of what ails us is really lifestyle related. And then it gets back to the core of these 4 fundamental principles. Basically, sleep is probably the most foundational because of its broad impacts. And then how we basically manage stress and your mindset, how we move, how active we are, and then what we put on our bodies, and each of those 4 principles. So that was kind of the evolution of it. And then with my wife kind of on the parallel path, realizing that, hey, there's a way I can help people far better than anything I do in an operating room, prevent them from coming back. It's sort of the old Silicon Valley thing. Can you put yourself out of business, right? And I'll never do that because it's a human nature behavior, right? Not everyone's going to want to or be able to change. But if I can at least help one person change.
I heard you talking about so much of our health issues come down to our identity.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
I think it's really fascinating. That's one thing I tell my wife. We were talking about this, and I was harping on her. I said, this mindset's like 90% of this. It's how you see yourself. I used to tell myself, oh, when I get here, I'll do this, right? It's like, I'll get to this when I have the time. And it's like, no, you have to, the sort of phrase is winning the inner battle first. The time is now. There's no good time to start something. The best time was yesterday, but the second best time is now. And so you have to just basically execute behaviors consistently. I can't remember who said it, but we don't give up on our goals. We sort of drift away from them. And as I heard that comment, I kind of reflected back, and I was thinking, I was on a walk, and I was like, that's 100% what it is, because you start out wanting to do something and, quote, life gets in the way, right? And so if you can get yourself to consistently execute behaviors over the long term, then you can achieve just about anything you want to do. And the ability to execute behaviors gets to the mindset of like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to stay consistent with it. So then you have to hold yourself accountable to that.
Yeah, and saying to yourself, not what would I do, but what would a healthy person do?
Yeah, that's a great strategy is say, okay, well, I'm not going to do this, but what would my future self do? Or what would a healthy person, what decision would they make in this circumstance? And that's a great way to function almost as your own coach, in the sense that that's almost like a mirror test, but you look in the mirror and say, okay, well, if I were this, what would I do? And if you ask yourself those, and that's why I was getting back to the kind of, you ask yourself just 4 questions every day. How did I sleep? How did I think? How did I eat? How did I move? And if you ask those questions consistently every day, you'll start to develop awareness around it. I mean, everyone's human, right? We've got a little drawer at the surgery center with Hershey's in it and stuff. And, you might go hit it, but it's like, okay, well now, how'd I eat today? Well, I did pretty good, but I kind of hit the Hershey bar drawer. So maybe next time, why did I do that? What can I do differently next time? It's just a constant process.
Wren, I think it's so neat. And when Dora and I were talking about it before the podcast, how you are including, we get the sleep for sure. We get the eating, the nutrition for sure, and the importance of movement for sure. But how you add think in there is pretty fascinating. Can you talk about that?
Well, think is primarily stress management, but it also incorporates mindset, which they're kind of interrelated, but your ability to manage stress, there's a great, I blank on his name, Richard Siles, Seyles, Stress of Life is a book from the 50s, but did these fascinating experiments. Apologize if you're not in animal experiments and things, but basically you could kill an animal with stress only. Like you could not feed an animal, it'll live for 3-4 weeks, a month. But if you induce stress, you will literally kill them. And so he would do these experiments and literally just by inducing stress, produce physiologic change. And we're no different. The human animal's no different in that context. So if you are stressed out, if you're tired, if you're not sleeping, you don't manage your emotions well, you end up with more interpersonal interactions, which compounds stress. You make poor food decisions when you're tired. There's a whole physiologic process that goes on with your brain basically craving glucose. And you cannot overcome, your will cannot fight the desire to give your brain glucose if it needs it. Like it's just an inborn drive. Stress will drive many of the choices that you make that affect your movement and your food primarily. So foundationally, if you start with sleep, sleep sets you up for success on all levels. It sets you up. It also sets you up emotionally and in terms of your mindset. So then your mindset, your ability to manage stress is kind of the second step. And then if you get adequate sleep and you're managing stress, your mindset's strong, the eating and the movement almost just happen, so to speak. Like it's a cascading effect, or you think of a pyramid, the foundational steps. If you try to manage your stress, but you don't sleep well, it's not going to be successful. You're going to be irritable, and then that's going to compound and add more stress. You're going to make poor food choices. You're not going to work out because you know what? Crap, I feel like crap today. I'm not going to work out because so-and-so did this or whatever. That's the reason mindset's included, because the puzzle is incomplete without that piece. And then stress also physiologically drives many of the ailments we have. I'll see people in the office, and if you start to listen to them, we have this concept in hand surgery. It's called an arm ache. It's like a headache, but it's pain in your limb that's non-physiologic. In other words, most of what I do in hand surgery is applied anatomy. Something is wrong mechanically, I identify it and fix it. But there's a subset of people that come in and there's nothing wrong. Like physiologically, I can't find anything wrong. There's no tendonitis, there's no nerve issue, there's no fracture, there's nothing mechanically wrong, but yet their arm hurts. And if you start to drill into this, it turns out it's this concept of arm ache, and it gets to basically psychological factors, and it comes down to basically coping skills, low coping skills, and your ability to have this concept called self-efficacy. And so self-efficacy is your belief in your ability to basically overcome. So the flip side of the people I see in clinic are the people I don't see in clinic. And so who I don't see in clinic are people with high coping skills, high self-efficacy, people that have, foundational health. Yes, you may trip and fall, and we have a joke, you can't legislate stupidity. You're still going to cut yourself with the knife when you're cutting the bagel of the avocado. But by and large, there's almost a certain type of individual I don't see in clinic. So if that makes sense.
So if you do the 4 pillars,
Yeah.
the 4 things, you're going to have high self-efficacy.
And Wren, it could even be just like anytime you have something in your body and it's unidentified, there's no reason, it's that is what you're talking. It could possibly be that.
We talk about, I guess, psychosomatic illnesses or things like that. But my daughter, when they were younger, right? Oh, my tummy hurts, right?
Right.
And it's like, well, what's going on at school? Oh, well, it turns out, something's going on with a friend or whatever, right? So kids happen all the time. You'll see kids with trouble at home, at school, always have aches and things. So it happens no different than adults. Oh, it hurts to do this. And it turns out someone's bullying them at work, or they're having an issue at work. And so this idea that, your ability to manage stress, one of the outlets for it when it's overwhelming and you can't cope is a physiologic manifestation. And that's real. More so maybe in primary care offices and things like that with other sort of less specific symptoms. But 100% I see it in the hand world as well.
You're a hand surgeon, is
Yeah,
that right?
correct.
And so tell people a little bit about what your life is like as a hand surgeon. What is it like? What do you do? What are some of the things we can do to keep our hands healthy?
Sure. So I run a clinic that's busy because lots of hand problems are, they're episodic, number one. So they're not usually chronic, lifelong things. You're moving along life, something intervenes, and you'll come see me and we'll fix it and you'll go on with your life and life is sweet. So that's a good thing about it. It's very rewarding because we basically help people. There's not a lot of voodoo in what I do. There's no, oh, let's try this and maybe this will happen. So that part, it's very concrete. I like that. But the flip side of that, though, is because hand problems tend to be slow in occurring, they're kind of, people muck around with them for months before they come in. A lot of times that leaves people, they wait too long, basically. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is push information to people sooner so that by the time they see me, a lot of times they come see me, it's like, well, unfortunately, at the moment, we're left with surgery because your hand's been numb for years. You're at the point now where, yes, the only really alternative is surgery. Yes, there are things you could have done early on to help that. And it's a human instinct, probably more common in dudes with Y chromosomes than women. But women are just as guilty, right? We just put things off. And if it's not falling off, if your heart, if you have chest pain, you're going to see the doctor immediately. But if your hand hurts, you're going to ignore it. You don't have to run in for every problem. But a lot of times people will put things off. So I see a delay a lot of times in cure for lack of information. And the information out there it's either non-specific or it's very overwhelming. So part of what I want to do is simplify that and just kind of get people to core principles and help them walk through this sort of how to evaluate hand problems. So what can you do to prevent those? We have to remember that the hand is part of the musculoskeletal system, and it is a mechanical system that responds to the same physical principles. And I tell people, it's why a soccer player can't play 5 games in a week, right? You don't see professional soccer games. They don't play Monday, Wednesday, Sunday. Well, they very rarely do. But if they do, the same people aren't playing. They're swapping them out. And the reason for that is it's too much load and there's not enough time for recovery. And so the concept of rest and recovery is fundamental in musculoskeletal health and medicine and anything that we do with our bodies. You can't run an engine at red line, for weeks on end. It's going to fail. The same thing happens with our bodies. So one of the things I see is as a human animal, we're not designed to sit for hours at a keyboard hunched over typing. We're not designed to do the same repetitive things over and over. So building in that rest and recovery, letting your body heal itself, which by and large it will. I mean, one of the things I've noticed over the years, it's fascinating, for lack of a better word, how unconsciously people are trying to kill themselves and the body still lives. Like the things that people do to themselves, whether, it's health, it's how they sleep, it's what they put in their bodies, and they still live and they function and the body adapts to it. So if you give yourself the optimal environment to succeed, your body will flourish on its own. It already knows what to do. We just interrupt that pattern. So in terms of, with your hands, the things that you do mechanically with your hands and then how you take care of yourself, the health has a huge impact in that. And that's where, as I realized, that's where the same people come back over and over. You're going to get trigger fingers, you're going to get carpal tunnel, highly associated with diabetes. Well, diabetes, by and large, is a lifestyle issue. And the people have type 1, which they can't help, but there's type 2, which is really the epidemic. And it's largely driven by inactivity, what we put in our mouths and things like that. So it's a lifestyle issue. So those are the things I think that are most critical. It's, again, it gets back to foundational health and then the concept of rest and recovery in terms of how you use your hands and what you're doing.
Does that apply to arthritis as well? Is that a lifestyle issue?
Arthritis is multifactorial, meaning there's lots of things that contribute. There's definitely genetics. People say, well, I have my mom's hands. Yes, you may, and that's okay. I'd sort of like to tell, I've got a patient, he was 74 at the time. He owned a roofing company, and he came to see me because he had on the side of his wrist a swelling, which is a cyst that forms in response to arthritis. And I looked at his x-rays, and I kind of laughed, and he said, why are you laughing? I'm like, dude, I can't find your bones. Like, I can't see the normal architecture of the wrist. Like, the arthritis is so bad, I can't tell what's going on. I said, does your wrist hurt? He's like, no, I don't really have any pain, but I've got this swelling. I thought, oh, it's fascinating. And he was a weightlifter, resistance training. He was very big. He was really muscular. And he sort of joked, his buddies call him the green guy because everything he ate was green. So he's probably a little bit extreme, right? But it just proves the point that he had a strong muscular base, which is important. So that gets to the movement and resistance training, which is a huge part of that. And his diet was very clean. So I've had people that have thumb arthritis, very common in women, the base of the thumb, more common women than men.
Me, I have it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I tell people, I see lots of people in their 70s and 80s, and they'll have huge bumps and they have no pain. And I'll ask them, I'll see for something else, did your thumb bother you? They say, oh, it hurt like dick a few years ago, it kind of went away. And your body is trying to adapt and deal with this. And there's a process that involves a lot of inflammation. And when that happens, there are definitely people who will decrease sugar, processed foods. They'll make changes to their diet, and that will help with their arthritis. There's stuff you can do to strengthen the muscles about the hand that will support the thumb joint, and they'll have less pain. So absolutely, arthritis can be impacted by basically your level of muscular stability and what you put in your body and how you drive inflammation with what you eat. And then it gets to sleep as well and managing stress. All those things contribute.
Wren, isn't one of the things to determine your strength, as you age, if you can get up without using your hands? And was one of them hanging and grip strength?
So these things are correlated with longevity, and it's all getting back at basically how strong and fit you are. I had a patient just a couple weeks ago. We were talking because one of the things, I walk basically. I'm not much of a runner, but I basically just walk. And we were talking about this, and it can be a long, I sort of shoot for maybe 15,000 steps a day. And it's enjoyable. I listen to things. And she was saying, oh my gosh, people try to get me to this and this, but I like to walk too. And it's so refreshing. And I was talking about, resistance training. And she said, my husband, he's always wanted to get to the Y, and he's like 72. And I noticed that I've watched him a couple times stumble and he hasn't fallen. I think, oh my God, he's going to fall. He catches himself. And it's like, yeah, that's because he is getting stronger. His body is stronger. And so things like grip strength, your ability to hang, these are proxies for your overall strength. And at any age, you can improve your strength. Almost unequivocally, I wrote a little book to make the argument, resistance training over 40, basically unlocking the key to longevity, weight loss, and wellness. And there is no drug you can take. There is no surgery that you can have. There's no medicine. There's no Instagram protocol. Anything that will do for you what resistance training will. And so the stronger you are, the downstream effects on every aspect of your health and wellness are basically unmatched. And so that gets to what you're talking about, your grip strength and things like that. You improve that stuff, it will absolutely help you live longer and healthier.
What is Hand Guy MD? Is that your platform?
Yeah, it is. And so it's interesting. It's been an evolution. So I started it initially. This is what I was getting at, trying to get the information to people in a consolidated way, clearly, not confusing. My wife teases me. You can kind of see behind me, a little bit. Everything's in every place. It's a little bit me, but trying to make things clear. When I'm in the office with someone, the explanations are very clear and they appreciate that. But sometimes I would leave the visit and I would go in. It would take 20, 30 seconds and, I identify the problem. They feel like they got value, but I feel like, geez, it took basically 30 seconds and they probably didn't need to be here. If they only knew the right information, they could avoid coming to see me because it's a half day by the time you take time out of the office and things like that. So I want to try to push that information forward. Well, I started, but I didn't want to be the face of it. And so I kind of like the Blue Man Group, I kind of tried to create this. And then as I sort of evolved, I realized, well, that's A, maybe it's a little confusing, and B, you can't really do that, right? People need a face, basically. So I've sort of driven that along, and I'm sort of transitioning this to basically Dr. Wren, and also incorporating the health part to it. It's sort of an evolution. So by the time this airs, it'll be drwren.io.
Oh, okay.
Probably just shut down Hand Guy MD, just to keep things simple. And as I started talking, the other part was as the health stuff became more evident to me, it was a little confusing, the Hand Guy part. So I just kind of make it Dr. Wren and be able to have a consolidated conversation. That makes sense.
And that's awesome that you're understanding the importance of education and that people really want the information. And like you said, then they can co-work with you or not have to come see you,
Yep.
which is amazing. We have so much more to talk to Dr. McCallister about, so please plan to join us next week when we continue this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
See you next week and be well.
Thank you for joining us on Health Gig. We loved having you with us. We hope you'll tune in again next week. In the meantime, be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast and follow us on healthgigpod.com. I'm Tricia.
And I'm Doro.
Be well.